Every single person walking this earth right now possesses something extraordinary, something that could change their entire life trajectory, yet most people will go to their graves never discovering it. This isn't about luck or privilege or being born into the right family. This is about recognizing the immense power that already lives inside you, waiting to be unleashed. What you're about to discover in the next few minutes could be the catalyst that transforms everything you thought you knew about success, failure, and the untapped potential buried deep within your own soul. Harry Lewis wrote Hidden Treasures: Why Some Succeed While Others Fail to Answer One of Life's Most Persistent Questions, the question that haunts us in quiet moments, the question that keeps ambitious people awake at night. Why do some people seem to effortlessly rise to greatness while others, equally talented and hard-working, remain stuck in mediocrity? The answer, as Lewis reveals through meticulous research and compelling real-world examples, isn't what most people think. It's not about intelligence, connections, education, or even timing, though these factors play supporting roles. The real answer lies in discovering and leveraging your hidden treasures, those unique combinations of skills, perspectives, experiences, and qualities that make you distinctly you. Let me tell you about Marcus, a 38-year-old man who worked in a warehouse for 15 years. Marcus wasn't unhappy exactly, but he felt like life was happening to him rather than being created by him. He watched younger colleagues get promoted, saw friends start businesses, observed people with half his work ethic somehow getting ahead. Marcus began believing the story so many people tell themselves, that success was for other people, people with better educations, better connections, people who caught lucky breaks. What Marcus didn't realize was that he was sitting on a gold mine of hidden treasures, and he walked past them every single day without recognition. Lewis begins his exploration by dismantling the myths we've been taught about success. From childhood, most of us absorb the message that success follows a linear path: get good grades, go to college, get a job, work hard, climb the ladder, retire comfortably. This formula worked reasonably well for previous generations, but it was never the complete picture, and in today's rapidly changing world, it's becoming increasingly obsolete. The people who truly succeed, who create extraordinary lives and lasting impact, aren't necessarily following traditional paths. They're doing something fundamentally different, something that can't be taught in schools or learned from conventional career advice. The first hidden treasure Lewis identifies is self-awareness, but not the superficial self-awareness that comes from personality tests or career assessments. He's talking about deep, honest, sometimes uncomfortable self-awareness that requires you to look at your life with ruthless honesty. Most people live on autopilot, reacting to circumstances, following scripts written by parents, teachers, society, or circumstance. They never stop to ask the fundamental questions: who am I really? What do I actually value? Not what I've been told to value. What makes me come alive? What would I do if failure wasn't possible? What unique perspective do I have because of my specific combination of experiences? Marcus spent his entire life believing he was just a warehouse worker, that his value was limited to his ability to move boxes efficiently. But when a series of setbacks forced him to examine his life more closely, he started noticing patterns. He realized he had an almost supernatural ability to organize complex systems, to see inefficiencies that others missed, to predict bottlenecks before they happened. This wasn't just about moving boxes. This was strategic thinking, systems optimization, logistical intelligence. These were valuable skills, potentially worth far more than his hourly wage suggested, but he'd never recognized them as treasures because they came so naturally to him. This reveals another crucial insight from Lewis's work. Your hidden treasures often don't feel special to you because they're part of your natural way of being. The things you find easy, the problems you solve without thinking, the perspectives that seem obvious to you but perplex others, these are often your greatest assets. We tend to overvalue what's difficult for us and undervalue what comes naturally. assuming that if something is easy for us, it must be easy for everyone. This is a catastrophic mistake that keeps countless people from recognizing their true value. The second treasure Lewis explores is resourcefulness, the ability to create value with whatever you have right now rather than waiting for perfect conditions. This is where the divide between those who succeed and those who fail becomes most apparent. Failed individuals typically have an external locus of control. They believe their circumstances determine their outcomes. They're waiting for the right opportunity, the right connection, the right moment, the right resources. Successful individuals have an internal locus of control. They create opportunities rather than waiting for them. They understand that resources are never perfect, conditions are never ideal, and waiting for everything to align is just another form of procrastination dressed up as prudence. Consider the story Lewis shares about Elena, a single mother working 2 jobs who dreamed of starting her own catering business. By conventional logic, Elena had no business even attempting entrepreneurship. She had no capital, no business experience, no connections in the industry, and barely enough time to sleep. Every rational advisor would have told her to wait, save money, gain experience, get her life more stable first. But Elena understood something that advisors with their spreadsheets and business plans often miss. Waiting for perfect conditions is a guaranteed way to ensure nothing ever changes. Elena started with what she had. She had cooking skills learned from her grandmother. She had a small kitchen. She had weekends. She started making food for her church's events, asking only for ingredient costs. She made meals for her neighbors when they had celebrations, charging prices so reasonable nobody could refuse. She saved every penny, reinvesting in better equipment, improving her recipes, learning from each event. Within 18 months, she was getting referrals from clients she'd never met. Within 3 years, she had quit both jobs and was running a thriving catering company. Within 5 years, she employed 12 people and was booking corporate events. Elena succeeded not because she had resources, but because she was resourceful. Lewis emphasizes that resourcefulness is a muscle you develop through practice. Every time you solve a problem with limited resources, you strengthen this capacity. Every time you create something from nothing, you expand your belief in what's possible. Every time you move forward despite imperfect conditions, you build the pattern of success into your identity. The people who fail, conversely, are often those who have reasonable excuses, valid explanations for why they can't move forward right now. And they're right. Their excuses are valid. But validity doesn't change outcomes. You can be right about why you can't succeed and still fail, or you can be resourceful and succeed anyway. The third hidden treasure is one of the most powerful yet least recognized, the treasure of your unique perspective. Every single person sees the world through a distinct lens shaped by their experiences, culture, education, failures, successes, relationships, and countless other factors. This perspective is completely unique to you. Nobody in human history has ever had your exact combination of experiences and insights, and nobody ever will. This uniqueness is either your greatest asset or a wasted opportunity, depending on whether you recognize and leverage it. Lewis tells the story of James, a man who spent 20 years working in corporate finance before being laid off during a recession. James was devastated. He'd climbed the ladder, earned a 6-figure salary, achieved what he'd been told was success. Now, at 47 years old, he was unemployed in a market flooded with younger, cheaper workers. Traditional wisdom said James was in trouble. But James had a treasure he didn't initially recognize. He understood corporate finance intimately, but he'd also always been passionate about environmental sustainability. This combination was rare. Most environmentalists didn't deeply understand corporate finance, and most finance professionals didn't care much about environmental issues. James created a consulting practice, helping companies integrate sustainable practices in financially optimal ways. He could speak the language of CFOs and accountants, people who typically viewed environmental initiatives as expensive feel-good projects that hurt the bottom line. James showed them how sustainability could reduce costs, minimize risk, attract investors, and improve long-term profitability. His unique perspective, standing at the intersection of two worlds that rarely communicated effectively, made him invaluable. Within 2 years, he was earning more than his previous salary. Within 5 years, he'd built a firm with multiple consultants and was speaking at conferences worldwide. What made James valuable wasn't that he was the best finance person or the most knowledgeable environmentalist. What made him valuable was his unique position at the intersection, his ability to translate between two worlds, his perspective that could bridge gaps others couldn't. This is true for every person reading these words right now. You stand at a unique intersection of experiences and knowledge. You have perspectives that seem obvious to you, but would be revolutionary to others. The question is whether you'll recognize these treasures or dismiss them as commonplace. Lewis dedicates considerable attention to the fourth treasure, your network of relationships, but not in the superficial networking sense that dominates so much business advice. He's not talking about collecting business cards or accumulating LinkedIn connections. He's talking about genuine relationships built on mutual value creation, trust, and authentic connection. The most successful people, Lewis demonstrates through extensive research, aren't necessarily the most talented or hardworking. They're the people who build genuine relationships and understand that success is fundamentally collaborative. This is where many people sabotage themselves without realizing it. They approach relationships transactionally, always calculating what they can get, keeping score of who owes whom. They network by asking for favors, requesting introductions, seeking opportunities. This approach occasionally produces short-term results but never builds lasting success. The people who truly leverage the treasure of relationships operate completely differently. They lead with value. They make introductions that benefit others without expecting anything in return. They share knowledge freely. They celebrate others' successes genuinely. They show up when people need help, not just when opportunities are available. Lewis shares the remarkable story of Patricia, a woman who built a multi-million-dollar real estate business, not through aggressive sales tactics or manipulative networking, but through authentic relationships and consistent value creation. Patricia started in real estate during the 2008 financial crisis, possibly the worst possible timing imaginable. While other agents were desperately chasing every potential sale, Patricia took a counterintuitive approach. She spent her time helping people even when there was no immediate transaction possible. She advised people facing foreclosure about their options, connected struggling homeowners with resources, shared market knowledge freely with anyone who asked, and genuinely cared about people's housing situations beyond just making commissions. For 2 years, Patricia barely earned enough to cover basic expenses. Her colleagues thought she was naive, wasting time on people who couldn't or wouldn't buy or sell properties. But Patricia was making deposits in the relationship bank, building genuine connections based on trust and value. When the market eventually recovered, Patricia had something her competitors didn't: a vast network of people who trusted her completely, who recommended her enthusiastically, who would never consider working with anyone else. Her business exploded, not through her efforts to chase clients, but through clients seeking her out. Today, over 70% of Patricia's business comes from referrals and repeat clients, a percentage almost unheard of in her industry. The principle here extends far beyond real estate. Whether you're an employee seeking advancement, an entrepreneur building a company, an artist seeking an audience, or anyone pursuing meaningful success, your network of genuine relationships will determine your ceiling. But you cannot fake this. People have highly sensitive authenticity detectors. They know when someone is genuinely interested in them versus interested in what they can provide. The treasure of relationships is only available to those who approach connections with authenticity and a giving mindset. The fifth treasure Lewis identifies is resilience, but he reframes this often misunderstood quality. Resilience isn't about being tough or emotionless or pushing through pain without acknowledging it. Real resilience, the kind that separates those who ultimately succeed from those who fail, is about emotional flexibility and narrative control. It's about how quickly you can metabolize setbacks, extract lessons, and maintain forward momentum. It's about the stories you tell yourself about what's happening in your life. Every person faces obstacles, setbacks, failures, and disappointments. This is not optional, it's part of the human experience. What varies dramatically between individuals is how they interpret and respond to these inevitable difficulties. People who fail tend to tell themselves victim narratives. This always happens to me. Nothing ever works out. I'm not lucky like other people. The system is rigged against me. These narratives might contain elements of truth. The world certainly isn't fair. Systems are often rigged. Luck does matter. But these narratives are also self-fulfilling prophecies. When you tell yourself stories of helplessness, you create helplessness. People who succeed tell themselves different stories about the exact same setbacks. They frame obstacles as learning opportunities, not evidence of inadequacy. They view failure as feedback, not as identity. They see setbacks as temporary rather than permanent. This isn't about toxic positivity or denying reality. It's about choosing empowering interpretations over disempowering ones when multiple interpretations are possible, which is almost always the case. Lewis shares the powerful story of David, a man who experienced a series of devastating setbacks that would have permanently derailed most people. David lost his job due to company bankruptcy. 6 months later, his wife was diagnosed with a serious illness requiring expensive treatment. A year after that, he was in a car accident that left him with chronic pain. By any measure, David had every reason to give up, to feel victimized by life, to become bitter about his circumstances. Nobody would have blamed him for sliding into depression or giving up on his ambitions. But David made a different choice. He decided that these experiences, as painful as they were, could become his greatest treasures if he let them. Losing his job forced him to reconsider his career path and ultimately start a business he'd been too scared to pursue while employed. His wife's illness taught him about the healthcare system's failures and gaps, knowledge he later used to create a patient advocacy service that helped thousands of people navigate medical complexities. The chronic pain from his accident led him to explore alternative therapies, which opened an entire world of wellness practices he eventually integrated into his life and taught to others. David's circumstances didn't change through positive thinking. His resilience didn't magically make hard things easy. What changed was his relationship to his circumstances. He discovered that resilience isn't about avoiding difficulty, it's about mining difficulty for treasures, about extracting value and growth from the very experiences that could break you. This is perhaps the most profound insight in Lewis's entire work. Your worst experiences, processed correctly, can become your greatest assets. The sixth treasure is what Lewis calls specialized knowledge, but he means something specific and different from formal education. Specialized knowledge, in his framework, is deep understanding of specific topics or skills that provides disproportionate value in particular contexts. This knowledge often comes from obsessive interest, personal experience, or extensive practice rather than formal study. It's the kind of knowledge that makes you the person others seek out when they need help with specific problems. The crucial insight here is that specialized knowledge doesn't need to be conventionally impressive or broadly valuable. In fact, some of the most valuable specialized knowledge is in niches that most people would overlook. Lewis profiles a woman named Sarah, who became a six-figure consultant despite having no college degree and no traditional credentials. Her specialized knowledge: she understood Instagram's algorithm better than almost anyone on the planet. She'd spent years studying patterns, testing theories, analyzing results, and developing frameworks for predicting what content would succeed. Businesses paid Sarah thousands of dollars per hour for this knowledge because it directly impacted their ability to reach customers and generate revenue. What makes specialized knowledge a treasure is the combination of depth and applicability. You don't need to know a little about everything. In fact, that's often counterproductive. You need to know a lot about specific things that other people find valuable. The key is identifying what knowledge you already have or could develop that others would find useful, then deepening that knowledge to expert levels. For Marcus, the warehouse worker we met earlier, his specialized knowledge was logistics and systems optimization. Once he recognized this as valuable rather than ordinary, he began deliberately expanding this knowledge. He studied supply chain management, learned about inventory systems, read everything he could about process improvement. Within 18 months of this conscious specialization, he left his warehouse job to become a logistics consultant, helping small manufacturers optimize their operations. His knowledge, which had been invisible to him as a treasure while working in the warehouse, became the foundation of a thriving consulting practice once he recognized and developed it. The seventh treasure Lewis explores is particularly relevant in our current era, the treasure of attention and focus. We live in a world of unprecedented distraction. The average person checks their phone over 150 times per day. We're constantly interrupted by notifications, emails, messages, news alerts, and countless other attention thieves. Most people's attention is fragmented into thousands of tiny pieces, making deep work, creative thinking, and meaningful progress nearly impossible. The people who succeed in this environment are those who treat attention as their most valuable resource and guard it accordingly. They understand that attention is the ultimate currency because everything else flows from where you direct your focus. If your attention is scattered across a dozen apps, news sites, entertainment platforms, and social media feeds, you might be busy, you might even feel productive, but you're unlikely to make significant progress on anything that matters. If you can focus your attention consistently on high-value activities, you'll achieve more in a year than most people achieve in a decade. Lewis profiles a writer named Thomas, who published 7 books in 5 years while working a full-time job and raising 2 children. When asked how he accomplished this seemingly impossible output, Thomas had a simple answer. He was ruthlessly protective of his attention. He didn't have social media on his phone. He checked email twice per day at scheduled times. He turned off all notifications. Most importantly, he created a morning routine where he wrote for 90 minutes before doing anything else, before checking messages, before responding to the world's demands, before allowing any inputs to fragment his attention. This 90-minute morning practice produced approximately 500 words per day, which seems modest until you calculate the compound effect. 500 words per day times 365 days equals over 180,000 words per year, which is roughly 2 to 3 books depending on genre. Thomas achieved what seemed impossible not through superhuman ability or unlimited time, but through focused attention applied consistently. He protected his treasure of attention while most people gave theirs away freely to whoever demanded it. The 8th treasure, perhaps the most overlooked, is what Lewis calls productive discomfort. This is the willingness to consistently do things that feel uncomfortable, uncertain, or scary in service of growth and progress. Every significant achievement requires extended periods of discomfort. Learning new skills feels awkward and frustrating. Starting a business involves facing uncertainty and risk. Changing careers means releasing the comfort of expertise and becoming a beginner again. Speaking your truth might strain relationships. Creating something original means facing potential criticism and rejection. Most people organize their lives around avoiding discomfort. They stay in jobs they've outgrown because the familiar is less uncomfortable than the unknown. They don't start projects they dream about. because facing potential failure feels worse than never trying. They don't have difficult conversations because temporary discomfort seems unbearable. They don't invest in themselves because spending money on uncertain returns creates anxiety. This comfort-seeking pattern, while emotionally understandable, is also the pattern that guarantees mediocrity. The people who succeed have developed a different relationship with discomfort. They've learned that discomfort is not a signal to stop, it's a signal that you're growing. They've discovered that the discomfort of pursuing meaningful goals is far more tolerable than the slow-burning pain of unfulfilled potential. They understand that every comfort zone is also a limitation, and expansion requires temporarily leaving the familiar. Lewis shares the story of Jennifer, a corporate executive who had spent 15 years climbing the ladder at a Fortune 500 company. She had a prestigious title, a six-figure salary, respect from peers, and job security, all the markers of success. She was also profoundly unhappy. Jennifer had always wanted to work in education, to help underprivileged students access opportunities. But leaving her corporate career felt terrifying. She'd lose her income, her identity, her status. Friends and family thought she was crazy to even consider it. The discomfort of making such a dramatic change felt overwhelming. Jennifer ultimately made the leap, not because the discomfort decreased, but because she realized staying was its own form of discomfort, just more subtle and chronic. She took a position at a non-profit education organization making less than half her corporate salary. The first year was intensely uncomfortable. She missed her old lifestyle, questioned her decision, faced financial stress, and dealt with people who thought she'd made a terrible mistake. But Jennifer also felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. She was doing work that mattered to her. She was using her skills in service of a mission she believed in. She was becoming the person she wanted to be, rather than the person circumstances had made her. 5 years later, Jennifer had become the executive director of a growing educational non-profit, creating programs that helped thousands of students annually. Her income had recovered to approach her old salary. She had respect, influence, and impact, but more importantly, she had alignment between her values and her actions. The discomfort of the transition was temporary. The fulfillment she found was lasting. But none of this would have been possible if she'd continued prioritizing comfort over growth. The ninth treasure is what Lewis calls strategic patience, the ability to delay gratification and think in longer timeframes than most people. We live in a culture of immediate gratification. We want results now, success now, recognition now. This urgency causes people to make poor decisions, chase shortcuts, give up prematurely, and miss opportunities that require extended development time. The people who achieve extraordinary success almost always do so through patient accumulation of advantages over time, not through lucky breaks or sudden breakthroughs. Consider compounding, whether in finance, skills, relationships, or reputation. Small, consistent actions create exponential results over sufficient time horizons. But you only get the exponential benefits if you stay in the game long enough, if you keep making deposits when results aren't yet visible, if you maintain faith in the process when others are getting distracted by shinier opportunities. Strategic patience means understanding that the most valuable achievements take time, and that trying to rush the process usually backfires. Lewis profiles Michael, an investor who achieved financial independence not through brilliant stock picks or lucky timing, but through patient, consistent investing over 25 years. Michael started with almost nothing, investing just $100 per month from his modest salary. His colleagues laughed at such small amounts. "What difference will $100 make?" they asked. They spent their money on new cars, nicer apartments, expensive vacations, maintaining appearances of success. Michael lived below his means, increased his investments as his income grew, and left his portfolio alone through market crashes, bubbles, and countless moments of temptation to sell or change strategies. 25 years later, Michael's patient approach had created a portfolio worth over $1.5 million, generating enough passive income that work became optional. His colleagues who'd laughed at his small contributions were still working, still living paycheck to paycheck, still convinced that wealth required lucky breaks they hadn't gotten. Michael's only advantage was strategic patience, the willingness to let time and compounding do their work without interference. This principle applies far beyond investing. Building expertise takes time. Creating a meaningful body of work takes time. Developing deep relationships takes time. Building a reputation takes time. Establishing a business takes time. People who fail often do so not because they lack talent or effort, but because they give up before the compounding curve goes exponential. They plant seeds and tear them up before harvest, then wonder why they never get results. The 10th treasure Lewis identifies is adaptability, the capacity to adjust strategies and approaches when circumstances change. The world is constantly evolving. Technologies emerge, industries shift, economies fluctuate, social norms change. What worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. People who rigidly cling to specific strategies, who keep doing what's always worked even when it stops working, inevitably get left behind. People who succeed long-term are those who maintain clear goals while remaining flexible about methods. This creates an interesting paradox. You need strategic patience to stay committed long enough for compounding to work, but you also need adaptability to change approaches when your current strategy isn't working. The resolution to this apparent contradiction is that you should be patient with goals, but adaptive with tactics. If you want to build a successful business, that goal might stay constant for years, but your specific business model, marketing approach, product offerings, and operational strategies should evolve continuously based on feedback and results. Lewis tells the story of Richard, who started an online retail business in the early days of e-commerce. Richard's original business model was drop shipping products from wholesalers. This worked well initially, but as competition increased and margins compressed, the model became unsustainable. Many of Richard's competitors stuck with drop shipping, watching their businesses slowly die while complaining about changing market conditions. Richard adapted. He shifted to private label products with higher margins. When Amazon dominated that space, he moved to subscription models. When consumer preferences shifted to experiences over products, he pivoted to selling experience packages. Through each transition, Richard maintained his goal of building a successful online business, but remained completely flexible about how to achieve it. Today, Richard's business is in its third major iteration and is more successful than ever, while most of his original competitors are gone. His success came not from having the perfect strategy from the beginning, but from being willing to adapt strategies continuously while maintaining his ultimate objective. The 11th treasure is integrity, but Lewis means something more specific than general honesty. He's talking about alignment between your values, words, and actions, about being the same person in private as you are in public, about keeping commitments even when inconvenient. Integrity might seem like a moral issue rather than a success factor, but Lewis demonstrates through extensive research that integrity is actually one of the most powerful competitive advantages available. In a world where many people say one thing and do another, where commitments are often negotiable, where people act differently depending on who's watching, being genuinely reliable makes you rare and valuable. People want to work with, hire, invest in, partner with, and recommend those they trust completely. Integrity creates trust. Trust creates opportunities. Many of the most successful people Lewis studied succeeded not because they were the most talented, but because they were the most trusted, and they earned that trust through unwavering integrity over time. Lewis shares the remarkable story of Catherine, who built a recruiting firm that dominated her market despite fierce competition from larger, better-funded competitors. Catherine's secret weapon was integrity. When she told candidates about positions, she told them the complete truth, including downsides and challenges. When she told employers about candidates, she shared real assessments, not inflated sales pitches. If she made a placement that didn't work out, she refunded fees or found replacements at no additional cost, even when contracts didn't require this. If she promised to follow up, she always did, even when it wasn't profitable to do so. These practices seemed costly in the short term. Catherine probably lost some placements by being honest about role challenges. She certainly lost revenue from refunded fees. She spent time on follow-up that didn't immediately generate income. But over years, her integrity created an unassailable competitive moat. Candidates trusted her completely and followed her recommendations without hesitation. Employers trusted her placements and gave her exclusive access to their best opportunities. Both sides referred others consistently because they knew Catherine would treat them fairly. Her business grew almost entirely through word of mouth, while competitors spent fortunes on advertising and cold outreach. Catherine discovered what research consistently confirms: integrity creates compounding trust that eventually becomes your most valuable asset. But you can't fake this or apply it selectively. Integrity only works as a treasure when it's absolute. One violation of trust can destroy years of accumulated credibility. People who try to be strategically honest, who maintain integrity when convenient but abandon it when costly, never build real trust and never access this treasure. The 12th treasure is creativity. But again, Lewis reframes this often misunderstood quality. Creativity isn't about artistic talent or being quirky or thinking up random ideas. Real creativity, the kind that creates value and drives success, is about solving problems in novel ways, about combining existing elements in new configurations, about seeing possibilities others miss. Every valuable business, product, service, and innovation is fundamentally an act of creativity, someone seeing a problem and imagining a solution that didn't previously exist. The wonderful truth about creativity is that it's not a fixed trait you either have or don't have. It's a skill you develop through practice. Every time you solve a problem, you strengthen your creative capacity. Every time you make unexpected connections between different domains, you expand your creative range. Every time you ask what-if questions and explore possibilities, you deepen your creative thinking. Lewis profiles Daniel, an engineer who worked in a factory that manufactured industrial equipment. Daniel wasn't particularly artistic or conventionally creative, but he had a gift for process improvement. He constantly looked at how things were done and imagined better ways. Most people saw the manufacturing process as fixed. This is how we've always done it. Daniel saw opportunities everywhere. He realized that reordering certain steps could reduce production time by 15%. He noticed that a slight design modification could cut material costs significantly. He figured out how to repurpose waste from one process as input for another, turning a cost center into a revenue source. Over 10 years, Daniel's creative problem-solving saved his company millions of dollars. He was promoted repeatedly, eventually becoming VP of Operations. When he finally left to start his own consulting practice, he had companies competing to hire him. Daniel's creativity wasn't about creating art or thinking differently for its own sake. It was about consistently seeing problems as opportunities for innovation, about refusing to accept that's how it's done as the final answer, about believing that better solutions are always possible if you think creatively enough. The 13th treasure is emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and manage your own emotions while reading and influencing the emotions of others. This might sound soft or secondary to hard skills, but research consistently shows that emotional intelligence predicts success better than IQ, technical skills, or most other factors people traditionally focus on. The reason is simple. Almost everything meaningful in life involves other people. Your ability to navigate human dynamics, to build relationships, to motivate others, to handle conflict, to communicate effectively, to inspire trust. All of these depend on emotional intelligence. People with high emotional intelligence succeed not because they're smarter or more skilled, but because they're better at working with others. They notice when someone is upset before it's obvious. They can read the room and adjust their approach accordingly. They know how to deliver difficult feedback in ways people can hear. They manage their own emotions rather than being controlled by them. They create environments where others feel valued and heard. These capabilities are immensely powerful, yet frequently overlooked in traditional education and career development. Lewis tells the story of Maria, a manager who transformed an underperforming team into the highest performing unit in her company, not by changing strategy or processes, but by leveraging emotional intelligence. When Maria inherited the team, morale was terrible, turnover was high, and results were poor. Previous managers had tried various fixes, new incentive systems, clearer metrics, additional training, tighter supervision. Nothing worked because nobody had addressed the core issue. People felt undervalued, unheard, and disconnected from purpose. Maria started by simply listening. She had one-on-one conversations with each team member, not to assign tasks or evaluate performance, but to understand their experiences, challenges, and aspirations. She noticed patterns of frustration and disconnection. She observed interpersonal dynamics that were creating friction. She identified talented people who were checked out because previous managers had dismissed their input. Maria used this emotional intelligence to make targeted changes. She restructured how the team communicated, giving everyone voice in decisions. She connected individual work to larger purpose. She addressed conflicts directly but compassionately. She celebrated wins and created belonging. Within 6 months, the team's results had improved dramatically. Within a year, they were outperforming every other unit. Within 2 years, people were requesting transfers into Maria's team while turnover approached zero. Maria achieved this transformation without changing the people, their resources, or even their fundamental tasks. She changed the emotional environment, and everything else followed. This is the power of emotional intelligence as a treasure. The 14th treasure is what Lewis calls productive paranoia, a term he borrows from Jim Collins. This is the practice of preparing for bad outcomes while hoping for good ones, of building buffers and backups, of never assuming success is guaranteed or permanent. This might sound pessimistic, but it's actually what separates people who achieve lasting success from those who achieve temporary success, followed by catastrophic failure. Think about the number of businesses that were thriving and then suddenly collapsed. The number of people who were successful and then lost everything. The number of careers that seemed secure until suddenly they weren't. In almost every case, failure came not from lack of success, but from lack of preparation for inevitable downturns, changes, or challenges. The people who endure, who build success that lasts decades, are those who assume nothing is permanent and prepare accordingly. Lewis profiles William, an entrepreneur who built and sustained multiple successful businesses over 40 years while watching countless contemporaries rise and fall. William's secret was productive paranoia. When business was booming, William saved aggressively, assuming lean times would come. When a product was successful, William immediately started developing its replacement, assuming competitors would eventually catch up. When he had one major client, William diversified, assuming that relationship could end unexpectedly. When everything seemed stable, William looked for threats and vulnerabilities, assuming hidden risks existed. This approach sometimes made William seem overly cautious to others. While competitors spent every dollar on growth, William maintained cash reserves. While others rode single products to temporary dominance, William diversified offerings. While others depended on key relationships, William built redundancies. When economic downturns came, or markets shifted, or key relationships ended, William's businesses survived while competitors failed. His productive paranoia wasn't pessimism, it was realism. He understood that success is fragile, and sustainability requires preparation. The 15th treasure is what Lewis calls strategic saying no, the practice of declining opportunities, requests, and commitments that don't align with your core objectives, even when they're attractive or lucrative in the moment. This is one of the hardest treasures to leverage because it requires rejecting good things in service of great things, turning down immediate gains to preserve focus on long-term priorities. Most people say yes too much. They accept opportunities because they might be useful someday. They take on commitments because they feel obligated. They pursue side projects because they seem interesting. They maintain relationships out of guilt rather than value. The result is scattered energy, diluted focus, and exhaustion without proportional results. The people who succeed at the highest levels are often those who say no most frequently, who are ruthless about protecting their time and attention for only their highest priorities. Lewis shares the story of Susan, an author who wrote a breakthrough book that created sudden opportunities, speaking engagements, media appearances, consulting offers, board positions, potential partnerships. Each opportunity was attractive. Each could have been valuable. Each came with good people encouraging her to say yes. Susan said no to almost everything. She said no to lucrative speaking fees. She said no to media appearances. She said no to consulting that would have paid multiples of her book royalties. She said no because her priority was writing her next book, and every yes to something else was a no to writing time. Friends thought Susan was making a mistake, leaving money and opportunity on the table. But Susan understood that her competitive advantage was creating outstanding books, not being a mediocre speaker or consultant or media personality. By saying no to everything else, she completed her second book faster and better than if she'd been distracted by other opportunities. That second book was even more successful than her first. Over 10 years, Susan wrote 6 books, each better than the last, building a body of work and reputation that created more lasting success than chasing every shiny opportunity would have produced. Strategic saying no preserved her most valuable treasure, focused attention for her highest value activity. So now, as I hope you're beginning to see, success isn't mysterious. It's not about luck or privilege or being in the right place at the right time, though these factors certainly help. Success is about discovering and leveraging your hidden treasures, those unique combinations of qualities, skills, perspectives, and capacities that you already possess, but may not recognize. The people who fail aren't lacking treasures. They're failing to recognize or develop them. The people who succeed are those who identify their treasures and build their lives around leveraging them. Let me return to Marcus, whose story opened this exploration. After years of feeling stuck and undervalued, Marcus finally recognized his hidden treasure of systems thinking and organizational ability. This recognition was transformative, not because it changed who was, but because it changed how he saw himself. Marcus began deliberately developing his expertise in logistics and process optimization. He took online courses, read industry publications, studied case studies of successful supply chain transformations. He started volunteering to help small businesses reorganize their operations, building a portfolio of results and testimonials. Within 2 years, Marcus had left his warehouse job and launched a consulting practice that earned him triple his previous salary, while giving him autonomy and purpose he'd never experienced before. Marcus's transformation illustrates a crucial truth. Your treasures don't create success automatically. They create potential for success. You must recognize them, develop them, and apply them strategically. This is where most people stumble. They either never recognize their treasures, dismissing their natural abilities as commonplace, or they recognize them but never develop them into marketable skills and valuable offerings. Recognition without development is just untapped potential. Development without application is just preparation that never converts to results. The 16th treasure Lewis explores is what he calls narrative control, the ability to shape how others perceive you, your work, and your value. This isn't about manipulation or deception. It's about understanding that people don't experience reality directly, they experience stories about reality. Two people can do identical work with vastly different outcomes because one tells a compelling story about the work's value while the other doesn't. The person who controls the narrative often gets credit, opportunities, and compensation that the person who just does good work without context never receives. Consider two consultants with identical skills and results. The first consultant presents recommendations in dense reports full of jargon and technical details. The work is excellent, but the presentation is forgettable. The second consultant presents the same recommendations as stories. Here's where the company was. Here's the challenge we faced. Here's the journey of discovery we went on. Here's what we found. Here's what changes we recommend. Here's what the future looks like if you implement these. Same recommendations, dramatically different impact. The second consultant consistently gets renewed contracts, referrals, and premium fees, while the first struggles for recognition. Lewis tells the story of Robert, a software developer who spent years being overlooked for promotions despite excellent technical work. Robert wrote clean code, met deadlines, solved complex problems. But in meetings, he described his work in technical terms that management didn't understand or appreciate. Meanwhile, colleagues with lesser technical skills but better storytelling abilities got promoted around him. Robert felt this was unfair, and he was right. But fairness doesn't determine outcomes. Robert eventually learned to control his narrative. Instead of saying, "I refactored the database architecture and optimized the query structure," he said, "I solved the problem that was making our applications slow and frustrating for customers. Load times decreased by 60%, which will reduce customer churn and increase satisfaction scores." Same work, different story. The first version was technically accurate but meaningless to non-technical managers. The second version connected his work to business outcomes they cared about. Within 6 months of changing his narrative approach, Robert received the promotion he'd been pursuing for years. The lesson here isn't that you should spin or exaggerate. It's that you must translate your work into stories that resonate with your audience's values and priorities. If you're trying to influence executives who care about revenue and risk, frame your contributions in those terms. If you're trying to reach customers who care about ease and results, frame your offerings accordingly. Controlling your narrative doesn't mean changing what you do, it means changing how you talk about what you do. The 17th treasure is what Lewis calls selective ignorance, the practice of deliberately not paying attention to certain information, comparisons, or possibilities. This seems counterintuitive. We're taught that more information is always better, that we should stay informed, that knowledge is power. But in our age of information overload, unlimited information often paralyzes rather than empowers. The treasure isn't knowing everything, it's knowing what to ignore. Think about how much mental energy most people waste on information that doesn't help them. They track stock prices minute by minute when they're long-term investors. They follow news obsessively, though most news doesn't affect their lives. They monitor what competitors are doing, letting others' actions dictate their strategy. They compare themselves to peers, creating artificial anxieties. They consume endless content about productivity while never actually becoming more productive. All of this is wasted attention that could be directed toward high-value activities. Lewis profiles Margaret, an entrepreneur who built a thriving business while maintaining unusually low stress and high focus. Margaret's secret was radical selective ignorance. She didn't follow the news. She didn't track competitors. She didn't attend most industry conferences or networking events. She didn't read business books or listen to podcasts about entrepreneurship. She didn't have social media accounts. To many people, this seemed negligent. How could you run a business without staying informed about your industry? But Margaret understood something profound. Most information is noise, not signal. The information she actually needed, things directly relevant to serving her customers better, came through direct customer feedback and her own experimentation. Everything else was distraction, dressed up as professional development. By ruthlessly ignoring most information, Margaret freed enormous time and attention for activities that actually mattered, improving her products, serving customers, refining operations. While competitors were attending conferences and following trends, Margaret was building a better business through focused execution. The 18th treasure is humility, but not the false humility of putting yourself down or minimizing your achievements. Lewis means intellectual humility, the recognition that you're probably wrong about many things, that your perspective is limited, that you have blind spots, that you need to keep learning and adapting. This treasure might seem to contradict confidence, but actually the most successful people combine high confidence in their ability to figure things out with high humility about how much they currently know. People who lack intellectual humility get trapped by their own expertise and past success. They think they know how things work. They've developed strong opinions. They trust their judgment completely. This makes them rigid and unable to adapt when their mental models stop matching reality. They double down on failing strategies because admitting error feels like admitting inadequacy. They dismiss feedback that contradicts their beliefs. They stop learning because they think they already know. People with intellectual humility remain perpetual learners. They hold their opinions lightly. They actively seek information that contradicts their beliefs. They're quick to update mental models when evidence suggests they're wrong. They can pivot strategies without ego attachment. They ask more questions than they make statements. They say, "I don't know," comfortably. This keeps them adaptable, growing, and effective even as circumstances change. Lewis shares the story of Alan, a successful business owner who lost everything during an economic downturn because he lacked intellectual humility. Alan had built his business over 15 years using strategies that worked incredibly well. He became convinced his approach was superior. When the economy shifted and those strategies stopped working, multiple people warned Alan that he needed to adapt. Customers told him market conditions had changed. Employees suggested new approaches. Advisors recommended strategic shifts. Alan dismissed all of it. He'd been successful for 15 years. He knew what worked. His confidence in his own judgment prevented him from seeing that what worked yesterday wasn't working today. By the time he admitted he needed to change, it was too late. The business collapsed. Contrast this with Linda, who built multiple successful businesses over 3 decades by maintaining fierce intellectual humility despite extensive experience and expertise. Linda constantly questioned her assumptions. She regularly sought input from people who saw things differently. She ran experiments to test her beliefs rather than just trusting her instincts. When something stopped working, she acknowledged it quickly and changed course. This humility kept her learning and adapting continuously, which allowed her to succeed across different market conditions, technological changes, and business environments. Linda's career demonstrated that intellectual humility isn't weakness, it's sustainable competitive advantage. The 19th treasure is what Lewis calls energy management, the practice of treating your physical and mental energy as your most precious resource and organizing your life to optimize it. Most people manage time but not energy, scheduling their days without considering whether they'll have the energy to execute effectively. This leads to being busy but not productive, having packed calendars but poor results, feeling exhausted without having accomplished meaningful work. High performers understand that not all hours are equal. The hour when you're fresh, focused, and energized is worth far more than the hour when you're depleted, distracted, and running on willpower. They structure their lives to protect peak energy for peak activities. They know their natural rhythms and work with them rather than against them. They pay attention to what drains versus energizes them and make choices accordingly. Lewis profiles Christopher, a writer and entrepreneur who produced extraordinary output while maintaining sustainable work habits and strong health. Christopher's secret was obsessive energy management. He tracked what activities, foods, times of day, and circumstances gave him energy versus draining it. He discovered he had peak creative energy between 6 and 10 a.m., so he protected this time ruthlessly for writing and creative thinking. He never scheduled meetings during this window. He didn't check email or messages. He didn't consume any inputs. This was sacred creation time. Christopher also noticed that certain activities energized rather than drained him, even though they took time. Walking in nature restored his energy. Playing with his children energized him. Certain types of conversations left him inspired, while others depleted him. He built his life around maximizing energizing activities and minimizing draining ones, even when this meant making unconventional choices, like declining social obligations or leaving events early. Over years, this energy management gave Christopher sustainable productivity that people with better time management but worse energy management could never match. The 20th treasure is purpose, but Lewis defines this specifically. Purpose isn't some mystical calling you must discover. It's not about finding your one true passion. Purpose, in Lewis's framework, is simply having a clear answer to why you do what you do beyond just earning money or achieving status. It's having work that matters to you personally, that connects to values you care about, that gives you reason to keep going when things get difficult. Research consistently shows that people with strong sense of purpose outperform those without it. They persist longer through challenges. They recover faster from setbacks. They maintain higher energy and engagement. They experience less burnout and more satisfaction. Purpose is rocket fuel for sustained high performance, yet many people never develop it because they think purpose must be grandiose. They think purpose means curing cancer, or ending poverty, or changing the world. This impossibly high bar prevents them from recognizing that purpose can be found in any work if you connect it to something you value. Lewis tells the story of Frank, a plumber who found deep purpose in work that many people would consider ordinary. Frank didn't cure diseases or revolutionize industries. He fixed pipes and installed toilets. But Frank connected his work to a purpose that mattered to him. He helped families have safe, comfortable homes. When a toilet broke, it wasn't just an inconvenience, it affected people's daily dignity and comfort. When a pipe leaked, it threatened people's property and peace of mind. Frank saw himself as someone who solved problems that genuinely mattered to the people he served. This sense of purpose transformed how Frank approached his work. He didn't cut corners because he cared about the families who'd rely on his work. He kept learning new techniques because he wanted to serve people better. He treated every job with care, regardless of size, because each one affected real people. This purpose-driven approach created a reputation that led to endless referrals, premium pricing, and a thriving business. Frank succeeded not because plumbing is inherently more purposeful than other work, but because he connected his work to purpose through conscious reframing. The 21st treasure Lewis identifies is what he calls strategic quitting, the willingness to abandon paths that aren't working rather than persisting out of sunk cost fallacy or stubbornness. We're taught that persistence is virtue, that quitting is failure, that we should never give up. This advice is sometimes right but often catastrophically wrong. The people who succeed aren't those who never quit. They're those who quit the right things at the right times to free resources for better opportunities. Every hour you spend on something that isn't working is an hour you can't spend on something that would work. Every dollar invested in a failing strategy is a dollar unavailable for a better strategy. Persistence is valuable when you're on the right path facing temporary obstacles. Persistence is destructive when you're on the wrong path, turning temporary losses into permanent ones. The treasure of strategic quitting is knowing the difference. Lewis shares the story of Michelle, an entrepreneur who started 5 businesses before finding extraordinary success with her 6th attempt. Each of the first 5 businesses taught Michelle something valuable, but none of them achieved the success she'd hoped for. Many entrepreneurs in Michelle's situation would have kept trying to make their existing business work, investing more time and money to turn it around, telling themselves that persistence pays off. Michelle made different choices. When she determined a business wasn't working, she shut it down quickly, extracted the lessons, and moved on to something new. This willingness to quit strategically meant Michelle failed faster and learned faster than competitors who clung to failing models. By the time she started her 6th business, she'd accumulated insights from 5 previous attempts that competitors spending the same time period on one persistent effort didn't have. Her 6th business succeeded spectacularly, not despite her previous quits, but because of them. Each strategic quit freed her to find the right opportunity, rather than remaining trapped in wrong ones. Now here's where everything we've discussed comes together into something profound. These 21 treasures aren't separate, independent factors. They work synergistically. Self-awareness helps you identify your unique perspective. Resourcefulness helps you develop specialized knowledge without perfect resources. Resilience helps you persist through the discomfort required for growth. Strategic patience allows focused attention to compound into expertise. Integrity builds relationships that create opportunities. Creativity helps you see applications for your treasures that others miss. The people who achieve extraordinary success aren't those who have all 21 treasures fully developed. That's impossible. Nobody's perfect at everything. They're people who recognize and leverage several of these treasures consciously, while being aware of which ones they need to develop further. They build lives and careers that align with their specific combination of treasures, rather than trying to succeed through someone else's formula. This is why copying successful people's strategies rarely works. You don't have their unique combination of treasures. What works brilliantly for someone with different strengths, circumstances, and perspectives might fail completely for you. Your job isn't to copy others' paths. Your job is to understand your treasures deeply and build your own unique path that leverages them maximally. Let me share one final story that brings all of this together. Lewis profiles a woman named Grace who, at age 45, was working as an administrative assistant, feeling stuck and invisible, convinced her chance for meaningful success had passed. Grace had spent 20 years in supporting roles, watching others get promoted while she stayed stagnant. She'd applied for better positions countless times and been rejected repeatedly. She'd started to believe the story that she simply wasn't management material, that some people were meant to lead while others were meant to support. Everything changed when Grace encountered the concept of hidden treasures. She began examining her life with new questions. What did she do easily that others found difficult? What unique perspective did she have from her specific experiences? What skills had she developed that she'd been dismissing as unimportant? Through this process, Grace recognized several treasures she'd been blind to. First, she had extraordinary emotional intelligence from years of navigating complex interpersonal dynamics as an assistant. She could read people better than almost anyone. Second, she had specialized knowledge of organizational systems from supporting multiple executives across different functions. She understood how organizations actually worked beneath the surface. Third, she had built relationships across the entire organization over 20 years, knowing key people in every department. Fourth, she had resilience developed through years of being underestimated and overlooked. She'd learned to keep showing up and performing even without recognition. Grace realized these weren't limitations or supporting qualities. These were tremendously valuable treasures she'd been undervaluing because they came naturally to her. Armed with this new perspective, Grace stopped applying for traditional management positions she wasn't excited about. Instead, she created a role that leveraged her unique treasures. She proposed to her company that they create an organizational effectiveness position, someone who could work across departments to improve communication, resolve conflicts, optimize processes, and help teams work together more effectively. The company initially hesitated. This wasn't a traditional role, but Grace made a compelling case, showing specific examples of problems she could solve, referencing her relationships and knowledge of the organization, demonstrating the value she could create. They agreed to a 6-month trial. Within those 6 months, Grace transformed multiple problem areas. She resolved a long-standing conflict between departments that had been hurting productivity. She identified and fixed several process bottlenecks that had been causing delays. She improved communication flows that had been creating confusion. The results were undeniable. The trial position became permanent with significant increase in compensation and authority. Within 2 years, Grace had a team. Within 5 years, she was a senior leader with influence throughout the organization. Within 10 years, she was consulting with other companies to help them develop similar organizational effectiveness functions, earning multiples of her previous administrative salary while having impact that mattered deeply to her. Grace's transformation didn't come from developing new skills or credentials. It came from recognizing and leveraging treasures she'd possessed all along but never recognized as valuable. This is the promise and the challenge of hidden treasures. The promise is that you already have everything you need for meaningful success. You don't need to become someone different or develop completely new capabilities or wait for perfect circumstances. You need to recognize and leverage what you already have. The challenge is that this recognition requires deep self-awareness, honest assessment, and willingness to see yourself and your experiences differently than you have before. Most people resist this work. It's easier to believe success requires things you don't have than to accept you might already have what you need but aren't using it. It's more comfortable to blame circumstances than to take responsibility for discovering and developing your treasures. It's less scary to stay in familiar dissatisfaction than to risk building something aligned with your actual treasures. But the people who do this work, who honestly identify their unique combination of treasures and build lives that leverage them, consistently achieve success that seemed impossible before they started. As you reflect on everything we've explored, I encourage you to ask yourself some uncomfortable questions. What abilities do you have that you've been dismissing as commonplace because they come easily to you? What unique perspective do you possess from your specific combination of experiences that others might find valuable? What relationships have you built that could become foundation for opportunities? What specialized knowledge do you have that others would pay for? What patterns of success have you demonstrated that you haven't recognized as treasures? These questions require honest, deep reflection. They can't be answered quickly or superficially, but answering them authentically could change your entire trajectory. Grace spent 45 years not recognizing her treasures. Marcus spent 15 years dismissing his systems thinking as ordinary. Jennifer spent years in a career that didn't align with her purpose. Each of them transformed their lives not by becoming different people, but by recognizing and leveraging who they already were. Your treasures are there, waiting to be discovered and developed. They might not be obvious. They might not be conventionally impressive. They might not look like other people's treasures. But they're yours, and they're sufficient for building meaningful success if you recognize and leverage them intentionally. The question isn't whether you have hidden treasures. The question is whether you'll do the work to discover them and build your life around them. Success isn't mysterious or random. It's not reserved for lucky people or those born with advantages you don't have. Success is available to anyone willing to discover their hidden treasures, develop them deliberately, and apply them strategically. This isn't easy. Discovering your treasures requires uncomfortable self-reflection. Developing them requires sustained effort and productive discomfort. Applying them requires courage to build something different than what others expect. But this path, challenging as it is far more reliable than hoping for lucky breaks or perfect circumstances that may never come. The people who succeed are those who stop waiting for external circumstances to change and start leveraging internal treasures they already possess. They're people who recognize that resourcefulness matters more than resources. That perspective can be more valuable than credentials, that specialized knowledge beats general knowledge, that genuine relationships create more opportunities than superficial networks, that resilience determines long-term outcomes more than initial talent. If you take nothing else from this exploration, take this: you are not lacking what you need for success. You are lacking recognition of what you already have. The treasure isn't out there waiting to be found. The treasure is in you, waiting to be recognized, developed, and applied. Your unique combination of experiences, abilities, perspectives, and qualities is sufficient for building meaningful success. But only if you stop dismissing these treasures as ordinary and start leveraging them as the extraordinary assets they actually are. Before we close, I want to leave you with a challenge, a call to action that can begin your journey of discovering and leveraging your hidden treasures. Tonight, before you sleep, spend 30 minutes with a journal or notebook answering these specific questions. Don't rush this, don't overthink it, just write honestly. What comes easily to me that others find difficult? What do people consistently come to me for help with? What unique experiences have I had that shaped how I see the world? What knowledge have I accumulated that others might value? What relationships have I built that could become opportunities? What setbacks have I overcome that gave me insights others don't have? These questions will begin revealing your hidden treasures. Tomorrow, identify one treasure you've been undervaluing and commit to developing it deliberately for the next 30 days. If it's specialized knowledge, deepen it through study and practice. If it's relationships, nurture them through value creation. If it's a unique perspective, find ways to share it with people who'd benefit. If it's resourcefulness, tackle a project with intentionally limited resources. The specific treasure matters less than the commitment to recognition and development. Success isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming more fully who you already are, leveraging your unique treasures with intentionality and courage. It's about recognizing that the very things you've been dismissing as ordinary might actually be extraordinary assets. It's about understanding that your path to success will look different from everyone else's, because your treasures are uniquely yours. It's about accepting that you don't need permission or perfect circumstances to start. You just need recognition and commitment. The treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to see them clearly, develop them deliberately, and apply them strategically. Your journey toward meaningful success begins not when circumstances improve or opportunities appear, but when you recognize the immense value of what you already possess. This recognition transforms everything. It converts frustration into excitement, waiting into action, victimhood into agency, limitations into possibilities. I hope this exploration has given you new eyes for seeing yourself and your potential. I hope you recognize that success isn't reserved for people different from you. It's available to anyone willing to discover and leverage their hidden treasures. I hope you feel inspired to begin the work of recognition and development today, not someday when conditions are perfect. And most importantly, I hope you now understand that you already have what you need. You just need to recognize it, develop it, and use it. Please like and subscribe to Audiobook Library, as it helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you more transformative content like this. Your support enables us to continue sharing wisdom and insights that can change lives. Every like, every subscription, every share helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages. Also, please check out our other videos in the library. We have extensive content covering personal development, business wisdom, success principles, and life transformation. Each video is crafted to give you actionable insights and inspiration for building the life you want. Thank you for investing this time in your own growth and development. Thank you for being open to seeing yourself and your potential differently. Thank you for being willing to do the uncomfortable work of self-examination and recognition. The treasures are there, waiting for you. Now go discover them, develop them, and build the success that's been waiting for you all along. Your extraordinary life is not something you find, it's something you create by recognizing and leveraging the extraordinary treasures you already possess.